Ethan Cole was only 7 years old the night his world shattered. It was a warm summer evening in Blackwood, Montana, a quiet town nestled between rolling hills and endless forests. His family, his father Daniel, his mother Sarah, and his older sister Olivia had spent the day at the lake, laughing and splashing in the sun. It had been a perfect day, one of those golden memories that should have lasted forever. But that night, everything changed. Ethan awoke to the sound of the wind howling through his open window. At first, he thought it was a dream, the eerie whispers, the rustling of leaves. But then he heard it. The creak of the floorboards. Heavy footsteps moving through the house. His heart pounded. He climbed out of bed, his tiny feet silent against the wooden floor. The hallway was dark, the only light coming from the moon spilling through the windows. He moved toward his parents' room, expecting to see his mother and father still asleep. The bed was empty. "Mom?" His voice was barely a whisper. No answer. The silence pressed down on him, thick and suffocating. He moved toward Olivia's room next. Her bed was also empty, the sheets rumpled as if she had left in a hurry. Panic rose in his chest. The house was too quiet. Ethan crept downstairs, his fingers gripping the railing. The living room looked normal, nothing was broken, no signs of struggle. But the front door was slightly ajar, letting in the night air. He stepped outside, barefoot on the cool porch, and called out again. "Dad? Mom? Olivia?" Nothing. Not a single sound except for the whisper of the wind through the trees. And then, as if the world itself had decided to answer his desperate cries, something moved in the distance. A shadow slipping between the trees. Too tall to be an animal. Too quick to be a person walking. He ran inside and locked the door, heart hammering. He climbed back into bed, pulling the covers over his head, willing himself to wake up from the nightmare. But when morning came, his family was still gone. The police were called. Search teams combed the woods. Neighbors and volunteers joined the effort. But there was nothing, no footprints, no signs of a struggle. It was as if the Cole family had simply ceased to exist, leaving behind only a terrified little boy with no answers. For 20 years, Ethan lived with the mystery. He grew up in foster care, always haunted by the memory of that night. He tried to convince himself that they had just left, run away for some reason he couldn't understand. But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. And then, on the 20th anniversary of their disappearance, Ethan found something. Something that changed everything. A clue. A shocking, impossible clue that would unravel the mystery of his family's vanishing and lead him down a path he never could have imagined. Ethan had spent years trying to forget, trying to move on. But some wounds never fully healed. Now 27, he lived in Billings, Montana, working as a freelance journalist. He had spent his adulthood chasing other people's stories, perhaps in an unconscious effort to avoid his own. But every year, like clockwork, the anniversary of his family's disappearance brought the nightmares back. This year, however, was different. On the morning of June 17th, exactly 20 years after that night, an envelope arrived at his apartment. No return address. Just his name typed in bold letters across the front. Ethan hesitated before opening it. His hands were already shaking. Inside, there was a single photograph. He sucked in a sharp breath as his eyes adjusted to what he was seeing. It was his family. His father, his mother, and Olivia. They were standing in front of a gas station, the kind you'd find on a lonely highway in the middle of nowhere. The picture was recent, there was no mistaking that. Olivia, who should have been in her 30s by now, looked exactly as she had the night she disappeared. His mother's arm was around her shoulders. His father stood beside them wearing the same leather jacket Ethan remembered from childhood. They looked normal. Alive. As if 20 years hadn't passed at all. The blood drained from his face. This had to be a joke. A sick prank. But the details were too precise, the way his mother tilted her head when she smiled, the silver bracelet Olivia always wore, even the small scar on his father's chin. This was real. And that meant. Ethan's breath hitched. They hadn't been killed. They hadn't run away. Somehow, someway, they were still out there. And they hadn't aged a single day. There was one more thing in the envelope. A handwritten note scribbled in black ink. Come find us. No name. No signature. But Ethan knew the handwriting. It was Olivia's. His mind reeled. He needed answers. Flipping the photograph over, he saw something else, something that sent a shiver through his bones. A location was written on the back. Red Pines Gas, Highway 89. Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed his keys, his phone, and a duffel bag. Within the hour, he was on the road, heading toward the only lead he'd had in 20 years. But as he drove through the winding mountain roads of Montana, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. And that whoever had sent the photograph didn't want him to reach his destination alive. Ethan's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as his car sped down the empty stretch of Highway 89. The road stretched before him like a black ribbon cutting through the endless expanse of Montana wilderness. The closer he got to Red Pines Gas, the heavier his chest felt. The note. The photograph. Olivia's handwriting. It didn't make sense. How could his family still be alive, unchanged after 20 years? Had they been kidnapped? Brainwashed? Or was it something even worse, something he couldn't yet comprehend? The note. The photograph. Olivia's handwriting. It didn't make sense. How could his family still be alive, unchanged after 20 years? Had they been kidnapped? Brainwashed? Or was it something even worse, something he couldn't yet comprehend? The night sky loomed overhead, stars glinting like cold eyes. He checked the clock on his dashboard. 11:47 p.m. He had been driving for hours and Red Pines Gas was still about 20 miles away. The road was eerily silent. No headlights in the distance, no signs of civilization, just the vast darkness stretching on either side. The kind of lonely road where things could happen and no one would ever know. That's when he saw it. Up ahead, in the middle of the road, was a figure standing perfectly still. Ethan's heart jumped. He slammed on the brakes, tires screeching against the pavement. His car came to a halt just feet away from the figure, a man dressed in black, wearing a hood that cast his face in shadow. The man raised his arm. Ethan's breath hitched. It wasn't a gun or a weapon in his hand. It was a sign. Large, bold letters scrawled across the wood. Turn back. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. He reached for his phone, his fingers trembling as he prepared to snap a picture, but the moment he looked up again, the man was gone. Vanished. A chill ran down his spine. His instincts screamed at him to turn around, to leave this madness behind. But he had come too far. Shaking off the unease, he pressed the gas and sped forward, his eyes darting between the road and his rearview mirror. The longer he drove, the more he convinced himself that it had been a trick of the mind. Maybe just some lunatic trying to scare travelers. Then his headlights illuminated a green road sign on the side of the highway. Red Pines Gas, 10 miles. He was almost there. But as he drove on, a nagging thought gnawed at his mind. Whoever left that sign knew what he was doing. They knew where he was going. And worse, they didn't want him to find his family. The note. The photograph. Olivia's handwriting. It didn't make sense. How could his family still be alive, unchanged after 20 years? Had they been kidnapped? Brainwashed? Or was it something even worse, something he couldn't yet comprehend? The night sky loomed overhead, stars glinting like cold eyes. He checked the clock on his dashboard. 11:47 p.m. He had been driving for hours and Red Pines Gas was still about 20 miles away. The road was eerily silent. No headlights in the distance, no signs of civilization, just the vast darkness stretching on either side. The kind of lonely road where things could happen and no one would ever know. That's when he saw it. Up ahead, in the middle of the road, was a figure standing perfectly still. Ethan's heart jumped. He slammed on the brakes, tires screeching against the pavement. His car came to a halt just feet away from the figure, a man dressed in black, wearing a hood that cast his face in shadow. The man raised his arm. Ethan's breath hitched. It wasn't a gun or a weapon in his hand. It was a sign. Large, bold letters scrawled across the wood. Turn back. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. He reached for his phone, his fingers trembling as he prepared to snap a picture. But the moment he looked up again, the man was gone. Vanished. A chill ran down his spine. His instincts screamed at him to turn around, to leave this madness behind. But he had come too far. Shaking off the unease, he pressed the gas and sped forward, his eyes darting between the road and his rearview mirror. The longer he drove, the more he convinced himself that it had been a trick of the mind. Maybe just some lunatic trying to scare travelers. Then, his headlights illuminated a green road sign on the side of the highway. Red Pines Gas, 10 miles. He was almost there. But as he drove on, a nagging thought gnawed at his mind. Whoever left that sign knew what he was doing. They knew where he was going. And worse, they didn't want him to find his family. Ethan's car rumbled down the desolate highway, his fingers clenched tight around the steering wheel. The warning still echoed in his mind. Turn back. But he was too close now. His headlights cut through the darkness. And finally, in the distance, he saw it. Red Pines Gas. It was the kind of station that looked like it had been abandoned years ago. A flickering neon open sign buzzed weakly in the window, and two rusted gas pumps stood like forgotten relics beneath the station's awning. A single street lamp illuminated the lot, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. Ethan pulled in, his tires crunching against the gravel. He turned off the engine, letting the silence settle around him. His heart pounded. What was he expecting? That he'd walk inside and find his family standing there, frozen in time? Taking a deep breath, he stepped out of the car. The air was thick with the scent of oil and something else, something metallic. He hesitated, scanning the area. No people, no other cars. But someone had sent him that photo. Someone wanted him here. A faint sound reached his ears, the soft creak of a door opening. Ethan spun toward the gas station entrance. A man stood in the doorway, illuminated by the dim fluorescent lights inside. He was old, maybe in his 60s, with wiry gray hair and deep lines on his weathered face. His tired eyes locked onto Ethan with something that almost looked like recognition. "You shouldn't be here, kid," the man said. His voice was hoarse, like he hadn't spoken in days. Ethan swallowed hard. "I'm looking for my family." The man exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. He stepped aside and nodded toward the inside of the station. "Come inside, but keep your voice low." A prickle of unease crawled down Ethan's spine, but he followed. The interior was what you'd expect from a rundown roadside gas station, dusty shelves stocked with expired snacks, a humming soda fridge, and a tiny counter with an old cash register. The place smelled like stale coffee and motor oil. The old man shut the door behind them, twisting the lock. "What's your name?" he asked. Ethan hesitated. "Ethan Cole." The man's face darkened. "Damn it." Ethan's breath caught. "You know who I am?" The old man nodded grimly. "I know what happened to your family." Ethan's stomach flipped. "Where are they?" The man's gaze flickered toward the window as if checking for something outside. Then he leaned in close. "They were taken." Ethan's pulse pounded. "By who?" The old man's eyes burned with something between fear and regret. "Not who." "What?" The gas station lights flickered. A cold wind rattled the windows. And outside, beyond the glow of the street lamp, Ethan saw something move. A shadow. Watching. Waiting. Ethan's blood ran cold. Outside, beyond the dim glow of the street lamp, something shifted in the darkness. Not a person. Not an animal. Something else. The old man, the gas station attendant, stiffened. His hand disappeared beneath the counter, and when it reappeared, he was gripping a shotgun. "Listen to me, kid," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "If you want to stay alive, you need to do exactly as I say." Ethan swallowed hard, his gaze locked on the window. The shadow was still there, watching. "What is that?" Ethan asked, his voice shaking. The old man exhaled through his nose. "You came looking for answers, but you don't understand what you're walking into. Your family didn't just disappear." "Then what happened to them?" Ethan demanded. The man's jaw tightened. "They were taken. And if they're still alive, it means they've been trapped somewhere that no one is supposed to return from." Ethan's head spun. Trapped? Somewhere no one was supposed to return from? What the hell did that even mean? He turned back toward the window. The shadow was gone. Ethan's stomach twisted. No, not gone. Closer. A long, creeping shape moved between the gas pumps, just beyond the reach of the station's dim light. There was something unnatural about it. Its movements were too smooth, too fluid, like smoke shifting in the air. Then came the sound. A whisper. Not a voice. Not words. Just a noise, curling through the night, brushing against Ethan's ears like something just out of reach. His whole body went cold. The old man moved fast, grabbing Ethan by the arm and dragging him away from the window. "Don't look at it," he hissed. "That's how it finds you." Ethan struggled. "What the hell is it?" The old man shook his head. "I don't know what they are. But I do know this, your family? They didn't just vanish that night. They were taken into its world." Ethan's breath hitched. "What world?" The lights flickered again. A loud bang echoed against the station's walls. Something had slammed against the building. The old man pumped the shotgun. "There's no time," he said. "You want to find your family? Then we need to leave. Now." Ethan hesitated for only a second before nodding. Because deep down, despite the fear clawing at his chest, he knew one thing. His family was still out there. And whatever was watching them from the dark, it didn't want him to find them. Ethan barely had time to process what was happening before the old man shoved a set of keys into his hand. "Back door," he whispered urgently. "There's a truck parked behind the station. Get in and start it. I'll cover you." Ethan hesitated, glancing at the shotgun the old man clutched. "And what about you?" The old man's jaw clenched. I'll be right behind you. Go. Something heavy slammed against the front door. The glass rattled. The fluorescent lights above flickered wildly. Ethan didn't wait. He bolted toward the back of the station, kicking open the exit door. A rush of cold night air hit him as he stumbled outside. The truck was there, a beat-up old Ford with peeling red paint. He sprinted toward it, fumbling with the keys. His hands were shaking too badly to fit them into the ignition. Another bang. The station's front window shattered. A terrible, inhuman wail echoed through the night. Ethan forced the key into the ignition and turned it. The truck roared to life. Footsteps pounded against the pavement. The old man came sprinting out of the station, shotgun still clutched in his hands. Drive, he shouted. Ethan threw the truck into gear just as the old man yanked the passenger door open and leapt inside. The truck's tires screeched against the pavement as Ethan floored the gas. The gas station disappeared into the distance. And in the rearview mirror, something crawled out of the broken window. A shadow with too many arms. A shape that didn't belong in this world. And it was following them. For several long minutes, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the rumble of the truck's engine and Ethan's ragged breathing. Finally, Ethan managed to force out the question burning in his mind. What the hell was that thing? The old man exhaled sharply. I told you, kid. It's not human. It's not even from here. Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. Then where is it from? The old man glanced out the window, his expression dark. A place people like us aren't meant to go. Ethan's throat tightened. And that's where my family is? The old man nodded grimly. That's where they've been for 20 years. Ethan felt his stomach turn. That doesn't make sense. How are they still alive? How did they, Tom doesn't move the same way there. Ethan's mouth went dry. The old man looked at him, his weathered face etched with something between exhaustion and pity. The night they disappeared? It wasn't a normal night. There are places in this world where the barrier between here and there is thin. Thin, Ethan echoed. The old man nodded. They call them liminal points, places where reality bends. And when the conditions are just right, like that night 20 years ago, people get pulled through. Ethan's hands shook on the steering wheel. So you're telling me my family has been stuck in some kind of other dimension? The old man was silent for a moment. Then he said, not just stuck, trapped. Ethan's heart pounded. Then how do I get them back? The old man hesitated. Then he pulled something from his coat pocket. A photograph. Ethan's breath caught. It was another picture of his family. Another recent one. They were still standing in front of the same gas station. But this time, they were looking directly at the camera. And behind them, barely visible in the station's window, was a distorted reflection. A figure that wasn't supposed to be there. The old man's voice was low when he spoke again. You don't find them, kid. They find you. Ethan couldn't tear his eyes away from the photograph. His family was right there, staring at him. They looked exactly as they had 20 years ago, untouched by time. But behind them, barely visible in the reflection of the gas station window, was something wrong. A shape that didn't belong. A blurred figure, its form twisting unnaturally. Ethan's throat tightened. Where did you get this? The old man, still gripping his shotgun, stared out at the road ahead. It showed up at the station 2 nights ago, just like the one you got. Ethan turned the photograph over. No note this time. No message. Just another mystery. The truck roared down the empty highway, the gas station disappearing into the night behind them. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan exhaled shakily. Tell me how to get there. The old man sighed. Kid, you don't know what you're asking. I don't care. Ethan's grip on the wheel tightened. You said my family is trapped. I need to get them out. The old man studied him for a long moment before finally shaking his head. There's a place, he said. A stretch of road that doesn't exist on any map. You won't find it by accident. You have to be looking for it. Ethan frowned. A hidden road? More than that, the old man said. It's a liminal point. One of the places where our world and the other one overlap. Your family was taken through one 20 years ago. If they're still alive, it means they're waiting for another one to open. Ethan's pulse quickened. So where is it? The old man hesitated before pulling something else from his coat pocket. An old, faded map. He unfolded it carefully, revealing a section of Montana wilderness. But Ethan immediately noticed something off. The highway they were driving on was wrong. There was a fork in the road on the map, a side route that shouldn't exist. You won't see it during the day, the old man said. But at night, if you're looking for it, it'll find you. Ethan's mouth went dry. And what happens when I take that road? The old man's face darkened. If you go down that path, he said, voice low, there's no turning back. Ethan's heart pounded. He didn't hesitate. Show me where it is. The old man sighed, then pointed to a spot on the map. And just like that, they were heading toward the forgotten road. They drove in silence for another 15 minutes, the truck's headlights cutting through the pitch-black wilderness. The tension in the air was suffocating. Then Ethan saw something ahead. A sign. A battered old road sign on the side of the highway. Faded, rusted, and nearly unreadable, but still there. As they got closer, Ethan squinted at the words. Then his stomach dropped. The sign read, "You have been here before." Ethan's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. What the hell is that supposed to mean? The old man didn't answer. Because suddenly the road ahead split. To the left, the highway stretched on as normal. But to the right, a narrow, unmarked road led into the trees. The pavement was cracked, worn down by time as if it had been abandoned for decades. But the moment Ethan saw it, his whole body reacted. A cold, electric sensation crawled up his spine. This was it. The road that wasn't supposed to exist. The road that led to the place his family had vanished. The old man exhaled. If you go down that road, kid, he shook his head. You better be ready for what's waiting on the other side. Ethan took a deep breath. Then, without another word, he turned the wheel, and the truck rumbled onto the road that led to nowhere. The moment the truck's tires rolled onto the cracked pavement of the hidden road, Ethan felt the air change. The headlights barely cut through the darkness ahead. The trees lining the sides of the road seemed too tall, their branches curling inward like skeletal fingers stretching toward the truck. The sky above was wrong, no stars, no moon, just an endless, suffocating black. Ethan swallowed hard. Are you sure this is the way? The old man didn't answer at first. His grip tightened around the shotgun, his weathered face unreadable. Finally, he muttered, I hope to hell it's not. The truck rumbled forward, the road narrowing as it wound deeper into the forest. The world behind them was already disappearing. Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror where there should have been highway lights in the distance. There was only nothingness. No road. No gas station. Just empty black. Ethan's pulse quickened. What happens if we turn back? The old man exhaled sharply. We don't. A deep, unsettling silence filled the truck's cabin. No wind. No insects. No sound at all except the rumbling of the engine and the faint, rhythmic pulse of Ethan's own heartbeat in his ears. Then, a noise. A low hum from somewhere up ahead. Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. Do you hear that? The old man nodded, his expression grim. We're getting close. Ethan's breath hitched. He didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. He was finally about to find out what had happened to his family. And something was waiting for him. The figure on the road. They continued forward for what felt like an eternity. The road seemed to stretch unnaturally, as if they weren't making any real progress. But then, something appeared in the headlights. Ethan slammed on the brakes. A person stood in the middle of the road. A woman. Her back was turned to them, her body still. Her clothes were familiar. Too familiar. Ethan's stomach dropped. Mom? The word left his lips before he could stop it. He flung the door open, stepping onto the cold pavement. His mother, the same as she had been 20 years ago, stood just a few feet away, facing the darkness of the trees. His heart pounded. Mom? It's me. It's Ethan. She didn't move. The old man's voice was sharp. Kid, get back in the damn truck. Ethan ignored him. He took a slow step forward, every muscle in his body tensing. His breath came in short gasps. Mom? Can you hear me? Then she moved. Her head tilted slightly. But she didn't turn around. Ethan's skin crawled. Something about the way she moved, it wasn't, right? His mother lifted one arm. Slowly. Too slowly. And then, she pointed deeper into the woods. The old man stepped out of the truck now, shotgun raised. His voice was urgent, firm. Ethan, listen to me, that's not your mother. Ethan's blood ran cold. But sheesh. Then suddenly his mother turned. And Ethan realized in an instant that the man was right. Her face wasn't human. Not anymore. Her mouth was too wide, stretching in a way that should have been impossible. Her eyes black, endless voids. Her skin was too pale, too smooth, as if something was wearing the shape of his mother but didn't fully understand how to make it look real. Ethan stumbled backward, his entire body screaming at him to run. His mother took a step forward. And then, in a voice that sounded like it was being dragged through broken glass, she spoke. "Ethan, come home." Ethan bolted for the truck. The old man fired a shot. The blast echoed through the dead forest, but the thing wearing Ethan's mother's face didn't even flinch. It just tilted its head. Ethan threw himself back into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut. The old man leapt in beside him, pumping the shotgun again. "Drive. Now." Ethan didn't hesitate. The truck's tires screeched as he floored the gas, speeding past the thing in the road. And in the mirror, he saw it watching them, smiling. Ethan's hands were slick with sweat as he gripped the wheel, his foot pressing the gas pedal to the floor. The truck's engine roared, tires kicking up dust and debris from the cracked pavement. Beside him, the old man reloaded his shotgun, jaw clenched. Neither of them spoke, but they didn't need to. Ethan knew one thing for certain: they weren't alone anymore. His heart pounded as he glanced in the rearview mirror. The figure of his mother was still standing in the road, watching. And then, it moved. Not like a person. Not like anything that should exist. It blurred. One moment it was there, the next it was closer. And closer. Ethan's breath hitched. "What the hell? Don't look at it!" the old man barked. "Just drive." Ethan tore his eyes away, focusing on the road ahead. But the trees, they were changing. The further they drove, the more unnatural the forest became. The trees stretched higher, their branches curling like skeletal limbs. The darkness around them deepened, not like nighttime, but like something was consuming the light. Then suddenly, the road ended. Ethan slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded to a stop just inches from the edge of a massive black abyss. A hole in the world. A deep, swirling void. His stomach twisted violently. This wasn't just a dead end. This was a place that shouldn't exist. The old man exhaled sharply. "This is it." Ethan turned to him. "What do you mean, this is it? This is just a damn hole." The old man shook his head. "No, it's a doorway." Ethan swallowed hard, his pulse hammering in his ears. He looked down at the endless blackness ahead. It wasn't just empty. It was pulling at him, calling to him. And then, from the depths of the void, a sound rose. A whisper. No, many whispers. They curled around him like invisible fingers, brushing against his skin. He couldn't make out words, but he felt them in his bones. A low, vibrating hum filled the air. The truck shuddered as the ground beneath them shifted. Ethan's breath came in short gasps. "What's happening?" The old man's face was grim. "It's opening." Ethan turned back toward the void, and something was coming out. His shadows broke apart, twisting unnaturally as a shape began to emerge. At first, it was nothing more than shifting limbs, too long, too thin, moving like smoke. Then came the eyes, not two, but many, scattered across its featureless face. And then, a mouth, too wide, too human. The whispers grew louder. Ethan's blood ran cold. He knew, deep in his soul, that this was what had taken his family. This was what had pulled them through. And now, it was reaching for him. The whispers became words. "Ethan, you are home." Ethan's entire body screamed at him to run. But there was nowhere to go. The swirling void stretched before him, endless and suffocating. And from its depths, the thing emerged, the thing that had taken his family. It had no true form, shifting between shapes, limbs extending and retracting like a living shadow. But its eyes, dozens of them, remained locked on Ethan, and its mouth, too wide, stretched into something that resembled a smile. The whispers grew louder. "Ethan, you are home." A wave of nausea hit him. The words weren't just sounds. They sank into his bones. They carried weight, meaning, memory. Images flashed through his mind. His family, the night they disappeared, the empty house he had been left with, the gap in his memory. And then, a voice. Not the creature's. His mother's. "Ethan, don't listen." Ethan's breath hitched. His mother's voice. Clear, desperate, coming from the abyss. His heart pounded. They were here, still alive. The old man's voice cut through the whispers. "Whatever you're hearing, kid, it's real. Your family is still in there." Ethan turned to him, his pulse racing. Then how do I get them back? The old man's face was grim. You already know the answer. Ethan clenched his jaw. The answer was simple. He had to go in. Ethan's hands shook as he stepped forward. The abyss was pulling at him. Not physically, but something deep inside him. A part of him that had been left behind all those years ago. His mother's voice echoed. Ethan, please, come back to us. He gritted his teeth. I'm coming. And then, he stepped into the void. The darkness swallowed him whole. For a moment, there was nothing. No light, no sound, no breath. Then, flash. And Ethan was somewhere else. The air was thick, wrong. The sky above was a deep, shifting red. The world around him was twisted, familiar yet distorted, like a memory worn down by time. And in the distance, his family, his father, mother, and little sister, frozen in place, their faces etched with fear. Ethan's breath caught. Mom, Dad, I'm here. Their eyes snapped to him, widening in shock. Ethan? And then, the creature was there, too, emerging from the red sky, towering over them. Its many eyes locked on Ethan. Its voice rumbled through the air. You do not belong here. Ethan steeled himself. You took my family, he said. Now I'm taking them back. The creature tilted its head. Then it lunged. Ethan ran. He sprinted toward his family as the creature closed in. The air around him warped, twisting into strange shapes, pulling at his mind. His mother reached for him, her eyes brimming with hope and terror. Ethan! He grabbed her hand. Then his father's. Then his sister's. And the world collapsed. The whispers turned to screams. The creature roared, its arms stretching, reaching. But it was too late. A bright light erupted around them, and suddenly, they were falling. Ethan's body hit the ground. Cold air filled his lungs. His heart raced. He opened his eyes, and he was back. The abyss was gone. The road was just a road. And beside him, his family. His mother sobbed, clinging to him. His father gripped his shoulder, shaking. His little sister, now a grown woman, stared at him in shock, her eyes filled with 20 years of lost time. Ethan exhaled shakily, his mind reeling. It was over. They were home. The old man stood nearby, shotgun resting at his side. He met Ethan's gaze and nodded. You did it, kid. Ethan swallowed hard. Yeah, I did. But deep in his gut, he knew this wasn't the end. Because somewhere, in a place no human should ever go, the creature was still watching. And it was waiting. For the next time a door would open.